Welcome to Real Love Guitars. It's what day is it? We're Wednesday, the 6th of November, and tonight we've got Larry's Candy Apple Red Mexican Strat, and this is an interesting one because it's a guitar that he just hasn't bonded with. So my job is to try and kind of give it a bit of something about it that he'll like to play. So it's everything you'd expect from a Mexican Strat, including, unfortunately, some split and peeled back, well not peeled back, what's the word, lifting finish. So there's a crack in there, and then the moisture and air has gone underneath, and it's lifting there, and it's lifting on the front there and there and there. So basically it's going to be falling off, which is typical bloody Fender, Mexico and USA. Anyway, so look, that aside, we're not going to do anything with that just now. Originally, Larry brought this along and said he'd kind of, as people do, he'd worked out in his mind what he didn't like about it, and then he sort of came with, what I'd like you to do is this, this and this. So his first, oh shoot, I need to turn off the, hold on a second. Oh no, I'll leave it running, should be all right. Yeah, he came with a sort of list of things he wanted me to do that would suit him, to make him like it more. And so I kind of thought about it for a little bit, and I thought that's one of the things that he wanted was a refinish in a colour that he likes and has always wanted a guitar in, and then a setup. So I sort of said that's quite an expensive thing to change all in one go, to do a setup and a refinish. And given that this finish, it's a bit mucky, but we'll clean it up nicely, and it you know, it'll be the sort of nice candy apple finish that people like, even if there's a hint of, I don't think it's gone, but there's a hint of a little strange sort of pucker here as well. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Right there. You can just see it sort of puckering onto the, like a vertical line going in that direction. You see it just going into the reflection there. Anyway, made me wonder whether that was going to come off, but I think it's mainly the clear finish. Anyway, so I suggested to him, why don't we keep the costs more manageable? Why don't we try and make this play and feel like a guitar he wants to play? And then if we can achieve that, then he can consider not only refinishing the body, but we could redo the neck as well and get rid of this flaking stuff. And if he didn't warm to the guitar even after I've set it up, then you know, he can just sell it on and won't have to put any more money into it. So that was my suggestion. I think that's what we're going to do, and that's what I'm going to do tonight. Quick observation, what I've also noticed about this guitar is that we can't get the saddles down any lower for a target action. So straight away, the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to shim the neck, which seems a weird thing to just dive straight in and do, but I know that it's going to require it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slack off these strings a bit, and I'm going to take the neck off. Oh, hang on, let's just do something else before I do that. What I will do just before I do that bit, I'm just going to check the relief with these strings on, and it's a tiny bit more than we need. So when I take these off, I will do a little blind adjustment of the adjuster down here. So obviously, if you want to just adjust the truss rod, you don't have to take the whole neck off. You can do it by popping the neck out a bit, and then making your adjustment But we have to take the neck off to put the shim in place. Now what I'm going to do on this shim before we do anything else is I'm going to put a little bit of double-sided sticky tape on it so it stays in place. Being the 6th of November, I'm afraid I'm almost unable, I'm afraid, and I do mean it in the nicest possible way, I'm afraid I can't not talk about the American election that's just gone by. But I want to do it from a sort of point of view that I genuinely want people who normally hear the word, or hear someone like me say the word Donald Trump, the words Donald Trump, and then they get defensive, and then they say something to me like, oh, you're Biden, or you're this, you idiot, your friend Biden couldn't this, that, and couldn't the other, and we're sick of this and we're sick of that. And for the sake of world peace between us, and for the sake of respecting, I hope, that we have more in common. I'd like to have more in common than divides us, okay? Even if maybe it doesn't feel like that at the moment. What I request you do is just hear me out, and please keep in mind that I don't know anything certain, right? For certain. I'm confused. I'm as lost as anybody else is in this strange and unsettling world. Now, having said that, up on the run up to this, was I anti-Trump? I was anti-Trump on his personality, which I react strongly to. And one of the things I always, and that's a personal thing, right? So one of the things I always try to say to anybody is that I don't really know, not being American and also not necessarily trusting when I read much of the time, I don't really know what he has or hasn't achieved in his time versus some of the things he claims to have achieved and so on. Now this, by the way, has got a shim on it already. Excuse me. It's going to need more. And the problem is, I don't think that this additional shim I'm adding is going to be quite enough. It's hard to say. So this is not brilliant, starting off with a geometry on this guitar that's requiring sort of a fair bit of shimming. And some people say, well, you're obviously setting the action too low. And that's not really true. I mean, people can, you know, it's not unrealistic to expect the guitar to be able to be set at a fairly low action if that's what the customer or the buyer likes. So, you know, it's clearly someone, factory or whatever, has put in a shim knowing that it can't get the geometry that it wants from scratch. So that's I would say that's a design problem. This is coming in at about 25 mils, a bit more, but it's paper so it compresses. We need more shimming, so we're going to need a bit more. I need to sort of double this one up a little bit. I do have some thicker material. I'll probably do, let's see, what would that be? That's going to be 25, that's 60. Yeah, about that's going to be about as much as I would ever want. So I'm going to save this one for a future time, and I'm going to use a piece of this. Yeah, anyway, so the not a fan of the personality of Trump. And that's, as I say, that's a kind of personal thing, and we all have our own personal takes on people in the media eye, in the public eye. Anyhow, and in terms of policies and stuff, my like many people, I suppose I have a focus on one key issue that sort of drives my concerns when it comes to which government or which presidential figurehead would be best on the issue that I'm focused on. And the issue that that I've been focused on, because I'm not American and I'm not looking for somebody to increase my standard of living out there in Virginia or somewhere, which I can't help but think looks quite a lot higher standard of living than I have out here in the UK. But I mean, anyway, that's beside the point. But so my issues primarily have been on the threat posed by Russia. Now, how you look at a presidential candidate in respect of that issue, of course, depends heavily on your take on the threat the issue represents. And I think some people, I'm sure, are quite confident that Russia is no threat, and that's okay. You know, they make an analysis and evaluation exactly as I do, or you know, in the same basic way as I would. They come to a different conclusion, which of course is totally normal and understandable. But I do have a strong take on the threat posed by Russia. I think it's a substantial threat. For those of you who sometimes don't think it is, I was listening to Mardan, one of the Russian what do you call them? Oh my gosh, this is absolutely lock solid. We're using low thingy strings here, low gauge strings. So getting this to actually work, get a truss rod or get enough relief in the neck isn't a guaranteed, and it would help if we have this was actually adjustable, but right now it's not looking to be so. It looks like it's stuck. No, I need a smaller thing. Anyway, so my sort of focus in terms of leadership has been about the need to stand up to Putin. And Mardan, Putin's one of his top propagandists, I saw a video of him saying quite candidly, actually, that the whole point, the reality behind the invasion of Ukraine really was nothing to do with all those things about denazification or arming, demilitarization or any of that stuff. He said very explicitly that, okay, wow, okay, so we're at a pretty loose spot here. It's a little bit rusty. You can see there, but it's not too bad. So it's only a one-way built-in truss rod, a single threaded bar thing. No, not bar, threaded rod. So I'm not going to be able to positively put any relief into it. So we just have to live with what the strings can give us. No, what did I just say? I said it was too much, didn't I? Stupid me. That means I need to tighten it from where it was. Anyway, so yeah, Mardan, he said it's not really about any of those things. He said we have to face up to the fact that we lost the Cold War. Now that's quite astonishing to hear a propagandist on a Russian TV channel say that. And he said, with a kind of look of quite a strong look of hatred in his eyes, he said, and this is revenge. We are now taking revenge by taking back the territories that are valuable to us, and that was the, it was the qualification that they were valuable. So that's a really explicit statement by clearly a sanctioned propagandist speaking on behalf of the Putin regime. So what it means is that all these sort of excuses that, oh, it's your fault for you provoked Putin because NATO, blah blah, making threatening gestures on their borders. Mardan, the propagandist, says no. We're enraged. We're fuming with hatred because we know we lost the Cold War, and our invasion of Ukraine is is our revenge for that, and we will continue to take back the territories we had before the disassembly, the falling apart of the Soviet Union. So, based on coming from the horse's mouth, you'll understand then why I take that as the given. I listen to that, and given that he is saying, and Putin's shown every sign of continuing to take territories, if he gets given what he has already taken, which is as far as I've heard, that's Trump's strategy of stopping the war is to give Putin what he's already nicked. You might argue that on a utilitarian sort of sense that, well, perhaps it's better to give away a quarter of Ukraine or a third of Ukraine, to avoid nuclear war or further blah, blah, blah. Well, you might avoid nuclear war in the short term, but given the statements by Putin and every sign, every piece of evidence so far, and every statement by the trusted propagandists, when being very frank, it's obvious that they're going to continue. And if Trump parks the war and comes up with a so-called settlement, not that I can't even see Zelensky ever, or the Ukrainian people ever agreeing to that, but let's say they did, well, you can absolutely bet that in 5 years' time, when Russia is recovered from its military weaknesses of the present, it'll be planning its next one, moving on to Poland or Latvia or Moldova and so on. And so we'll be back facing it again. So I think for me, the Prime Minister of the UK and the President of the United States and the leaders of the other countries of the EU, for example, to me are critical. Their stances on, or their commitment to stopping Putin are absolutely critical to me. And I absolutely don't see Trump stopping Putin at all. What I see is him buying him off for a short time. But actually it's just an appeasement, and appeasement always emboldens. Now, interestingly, one of the things I've had to kind of look at is it's easy to tell myself that the Biden administration was supporting Ukraine to stop Putin. But actually, if we're really honest, and we have to be in this sort of evaluation of what's gone on, if we're really honest, the Biden administration didn't act to stop Putin. What they did is they acted to prevent Putin's overrunning Ukraine, and that just basically guarantees ongoing war. So what I want to see from American and British politicians is a commitment to stopping Putin, and that's far too risky. None of these European countries have shown a stomach for that, and that does obviously to commit to stopping Putin means you have to first of all have an absolutely clear-cut understanding of what's at stake, and to consider it a severe enough threat to make nuclear escalation risks worthwhile. It's that important, or it isn't, and then you don't do anything. That's fine if you agree that that's the case. But I was originally, when I was thinking about the American election choices, I was thinking that well, at least lesser of two evils. At least we know the Democrat government administration supports Ukraine against Russia. But as I said, that's a bit of a self-delusion. it does support Ukraine to carry on being at war or resisting. It doesn't, as we've seen clearly, support Ukraine to win. And as a result, we've got the US ones, of course, Mexico. As a result, it just is a stalemate, effectively, unless we go at it with the intention of winning, which clearly the politicians, even Biden, has not shown any commitment to that, or any proper commitment. So I have to say that on looking back, if that's my number one issue that I think is the most present and clear and present danger of the moment on a global scale, and there are plenty of others to vying for consideration as well, but if that's, to me, one of my very top ones, and actually the other one has to be immigration, and that's a clear thing I'll come on to in a minute, because it's clear why that has also played such an important part. But so security, or the stopping of Putin, actually is my number one issue of concern, and the stopping of uncontrolled immigration, illegal immigration, would be a second one. So in both of those areas, the truth is that the Biden administration did nothing. Nor probably, I could be wrong, but nor, it seemed to me, did Trump the first time around tried or made noises. But anyway, the point is that the Biden hasn't done that. So actually, they're not any better or worse than each other in that respect. And I get it that people who have those as quite important priorities have got sick and tired of seeing no action being taken. And I have to say it's going to be a huge mistake that actually both the Tory and the Labour government immediately after are going to be making around in Britain, because what happens is, it's clear that in the US, Trump's popularity has to do with this not being heard on these key issues, and not being heard, and absolutely nothing being taken serious enough to do anything about these two issues. Now let's say that perhaps the immigration one is more important to the average American than the Ukrainian one is, but they're certainly two big issues in my mind. And as in America, as here, the public has been saying for years, we need some action taken, and nothing's been done. And I think it's obvious, really, that so-called populist politicians are now the ones who are basically coming along with a promise a vow to deal with those issues that basically aren't being dealt with. So I think it is too easy to fool myself into thinking that the Democrats, because they've been supportive to giving tons of money, tons of second-grade weapons to Ukraine to help it defend itself and thereby defend democracy in Eastern Europe. Because they've done that, it's too easy and sneaky to mistake that for the commitment to stop Putin, which it isn't, and it never has been, as evidenced by the fact that the NATO, or whoever you want to call it, the West, has completely given up all setting of red lines to Putin. He's the only one that has done a business in red lines. We've behaved as if only that bully can set the red lines, and it's because we're so afraid, which is another catastrophic message to have been sending from the outset. Anyway, send it we have. So I get it. I really do understand it. I don't like Donald Trump as a human being, period, and he probably would hate me, which is fine. But after that, I guess I can understand why the US, or a majority, has voted for him, and I can see that happening here. And this nut has already been taken off sometime in the past, so it will come off nice and easy. Yeah, I can understand. I can see it happening. I can see that it's in progress here. The same rejection of the normal political structures, because both parties, both the Conservatives in the UK and the Labour Party, have had more than enough chance in the last 20 years to actually tackle. So that's good. It comes out one end and breaks off the other. Have more than enough opportunity to deal with, or to make some inroads on illegal immigration, and they've all spectacularly failed to do anything, or even start, or even look like they're intending to do anything. So I can understand, I really do understand, why, if those things matter, and they certainly do, then, and they don't get addressed, and they certainly don't, and you've just had your fill of people taking political office and then completely refusing to follow through and take the risk of hurting a few feelings by putting in place, slightly hurty policies, like, well, we're going to have to actually send somebody back, or we're going to have to shut the door and not allow someone in, or, well, that's what it means when you have a clear rule on entrance and egress in your country. That's what it means to have a border. And of course, I also kind of get what people are meaning when they're talking about globalism versus nationalism. They don't usually say that, opposition, but as a sort of a crude what's the word, comparison. So I can never tell if this is a flat one or not. Anyway, so people are saying it feels to them as if some government figure above them has decided that we won't enforce or protect and enforce our national borders, because to do so would be to go against something. And in Britain we come up against what that would threaten every time somebody tries to put, whether a flawed or not, a scheme of repatriation or removal into place. And it's noticeable that whether you like it or not, a sovereign country, if you care about the sovereignness of a country, it absolutely should be able to remove somebody from its borders, and it ought to be able to have an intelligent say about who comes in and who doesn't. And so we don't seem to have that. And I totally get it that people are fed up to the back teeth of waiting for somebody to come along and make that important, or to recognise that this really is a defining. These are defining issues of our times for good reasons, and not reasons of which people seem to want to imply of xenophobia, or you want to control your borders, you must hate all people, or you want to control your borders, you must be stupid and not understand that we've got a falling population curve and so on and so forth. You know, politics seems to quickly dissolve or devolve into this insult-based thing, and it is much more complex. I understand there are the population shortfalls, and we are in trouble in one sense, and we will be in trouble, and that will have to be dealt with. But you know what? That doesn't automatically equal the best thing to do, therefore, is to crack open all borders and not have any say in who comes and who goes. And I know the people who are voting for the Nigel Farages, the Richard Tices, the Donald Trumps, they are people who are sick of being told that the desire for such border control is a racist thing. It makes you xenophobic or nasty, bigoted. And they're also tired, on top of that, of the other completely unlooked at or unacknowledged area, other than by the people themselves, who know it worse or better than anybody else, is that we're not just talking about the failure of a kind of national system process or a national sense of respect and taking care of its own borders. We're also talking about the fact that the open borders results in vast quantities of people who nobody is being honest about their cultural fit or suitability, or even the potential for peaceful coexistence. And again, the people at on the ground floor, on the ground level, their experience is this is absolutely, by and large, manifestly incompatible, and it's a huge problem. But yet again, that is absolutely unconfronted, unexamined by government. It refuses to look at it. This, by the way, this nut slot is not in good shape. It's been changed in the past, but it's got some unevenness in it. So I'm trying to work it back to at least enough flatness to seat one of these, or seat this new nut on it. Yeah. So truth is, I don't like, as I said, I'm not a Trump fan. I think the man is a barrel of trouble and danger in a lot of ways, and I think it's a tragedy that in many ways and actually both candidates, are the best that 300 million people could kind of sift down to end up with. But the point is, the voters, a large number of people, are saying the things that actually worry us, that are even more existential, if you like, or more significant than just, oh well, can we get a new car this year, or has our price of milk gone up a bit more? We're talking about unsuitable cultures in not coexisting religions and ethical, what's the word I'm looking for? Belief systems that come in and threaten, don't fit, and want to change the culture of Great Britain or America, for example, or people who come in and don't want to be bound by the culture of law and the rule of law, you could even say, and so on. So it's it's not even just a nice conversation about the sort of theoretical principles of immigration. It's about the very painful, practical, day-to-day issues about whether this is actually any good. And of course, growing feeling of the, and I hate to use this term because it's not a term that, well, maybe it's a term they would use, but the average working class Brit, who has to kind of live on the ground floor of this politics, their experience is that it's not working, and none of the political establishments will confront that as a bottom line, and so actually, like all people who are not listened to, double negative, no, like anyone who's not validated, what you get is you get people gravitating towards, I guess you might look like a more single issue politician who absolutely validates their primary concerns. But it's not surprising, and it's not surprising that Trump is doing that for, you know, a large contingent of people in America as well. And why shouldn't he? Why I genuinely get it. I have those same concerns, and I'm in the same boat as everybody else, in that if I were to just raise them, even as a discussion, say, which is more damaging, the having a kind of mass immigration culture, or in which incompatible cultures are crammed together and not assimilating and not actually harmonizing, or is it worse? Is it better to have that? Because one thing we absolutely can't tolerate is to have no workforce, because our youngsters aren't leaving their bedrooms, or our 50-year-olds aren't active in the workforce because they've given up on the dream, or whatever it is, So, there's so many important conversations to have around those issues that I think it's become very hard to even conceive of having those discussions. And I don't mean it in it's censored and they won't allow us to talk about it and you get locked up. Well, there is a new growing pressure on that it isn't something people want to talk about, or the establishment wants to talk about. But it's more than that. It's when we've got a situation when people have chosen their camp, they absolutely don't seem to want to. They can't seem to discuss the interesting aspects of these arguments, which are rewarding to discuss, and you never know, may lead to some better understanding and shared some enlightenment on different sides. But we can't seem to even do that. So, if I were to come make a comment on a site and say, look, I kind of agree with you on this, and although I did vote that, I find it really interesting to figure out which is the correct, which is more valuable or dangerous or more pressing or more this or more that. My experience is that we've gone long past the point where anybody would respond in a civil or curious, inquisitive fashion to kind of want to engage in the ideas that I'm trying to think through, which is a real shame, because that's where the polarization is quite extreme and unpleasant. So guess what I'm trying to say is a day into this situation result, I would say if you voted for Trump because you are sick and tired of not being listened to about the issues that really matter to you, then I understand, because actually you do get to a place where you just have to do it, especially if they are important enough issues to you, then you can't do anything else but go where somebody will take them seriously and acknowledge them and make policy based on them, and hear what you're saying, which is it doesn't work at the ground level, or it's not working from a cultural perspective. We have such dishonest conversations now, and I think that's probably one of the biggest threats in not having creating this environment where there's not a inquisitive, open conversation. And what seems to happen is things polarize. So I do understand. Does it mean I'm in any way less scared about how, for example, Putin's going to take this? You know, if Trump now pushes Ukraine to concede territory, the principle of that is outrageous to me, and I know it will lead to the Ukrainians who have been invaded, brutally invaded. It's a disgusting idea. It's a shameful idea that we would sell principles of sovereignty and the right to not be violated. We would appease, we would give away somebody's, or we would propose that a country give away its people into a slavery, effectively, that they don't want, into the sort of grey and destructive, brutal, actually, Ruski Mir, you know, the Russian world. And I just think to ask somebody to do that is, if they are telling you that they want to resist, is I don't know, I think it would be a shame. It would be to our eternal shame. But that's what my worry is that Donald Trump will do. I can't lie about that. I worry, but equally, I worry that we continue on in effectively an unwinnable war. You know, and that kind of conflict opens itself up, obviously, to the claims that we hear regularly that, you know, well, it's good for the military-industrial complex, etc., etc. And of course, it's true. You know, if you are actually stuck in a confrontation, or you're supporting a confrontation that actually you have no intention really of supporting the side you're supporting to win, but you are effectively just prolonging it, whether it's whatever the reason you might claim it's for, then it's a pretty terrible position to be in. So, and I think that's comes back to what I said, is that I absolutely don't believe in this. It's morally at all right to give away or propose that somebody gives away their people and their land to shut up or to take away the threat of, you know, escalation posed by Russia, or even to stop the killing. You know, what I'm absolutely certain about, and it's the only complicating factor, or the only factor for discussion, is how do you do this to a nuclear armed state. But the only thing I'm certain about is that Putin should be stopped, not appeased or bought off or traded out temporarily till such a time that he can build up his weapons again and come and take us on in another way. So, and the truth is, Trump's not that man. He's not willing to do it, because Putin's done what I think is good enough work on the Americans, let alone the Russians. And their perspective is, why do we want to be spending money on a war between people we know nothing of, blah blah. And the truth is, in a transactional level, that makes sense. Russia doesn't want to take over the whole of, take over America. You know, it would be quite happy taking most of Europe. And why not? It's got a good green light, I think, at the moment. Okay, well, we've still got a fair bit of relief on here, so I might, next time I get the chance to take the neck off or loosen it, I'll put a bit more tighten up this truss rod a bit more to straighten it or flatten it a little bit more. It's pretty good, but it could be a little flatter still. Now at the moment, I'm having kind of sanded the nut down from underneath. I'm at a point now where I'm near to the action that I want. Problem with this kind of nut, it's really difficult to get it down to perfection. It's better to get to a place where it works, like now, glue it in place, and then fine-tune the slots afterwards. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to glue it into place now, and obviously I'm using these strings as sacrificial strings, and for both the fret leveling, but also for as a kind of clamp to hold this nut in place, in position while I stick it down. Yeah, and it's much easier then to just fine tune the slots with the nut files. I'm just trying to move these things a bit out of the way. So the funny part is it's very easy it's easy to catastrophize about a situation, and for quite some time it was getting to the point that if in my head, if the US stopped supporting Ukraine, then it would be instant disaster, and Russia would sort of march in and do everything it wanted, and that would be the end of all opposition. And actually, in truth, get in place. In truth, it doesn't really make much difference what we did at this point. Either we are going to have to risk stopping Putin, or we're not, and we're going to leave him free to do whatever he wants in the European sphere of influence. That sounds horrible to me. As a European. But I can imagine it not bothering Midwestern Americans much. Why would they care if Russia came to the Iberian coastline? The Russian Federation couldn't it? So it's just over there. Okay, so what I've got now is the nut on, and it's gluing, and what I will do is I will just fine tune the nut slot heights. I'll go over the first fret with a feeler gauge, but now I can get on with the precision leveling part of things, and we've got a good action now. We've got the saddles a little bit taller than they were before. They're not decked out completely, which is good. We're not really bothered about the tremolo just now. This is only going to be used as a down only tremolo, so it's an easy setup because all we have to do is set it to a stable position for most of the time, and with a little bit of as light a downward movement as possible without running the risk of bent notes causing it to rise up. Anyway, so there we go. That was yesterday, all done and dusted, and with a bit of distance, I'm not freaking out. I think, just from my understanding, I think I actually wake up and catch myself thinking, hang on a minute, this demonization of concerns about borders, there's a reason it's demonized, and it's demonized so that anyone who talks about it, or far less any politician that stands on any explicit platform that recognizes that it's important to people for a good reason, right? God forbid, a good reason. Any political party is written off as a kind of fascist xenophobic, racist, whatever, and basically the concerns, the valid concerns, right? I'm a reasonable man, and I consider them valid concerns. The valid concerns of millions of adult British people and Americans have been patronised for all of this time, you know, and actually neither party has succeeded in doing anything. And in case of Britain, you know, the Conservatives tried, but they, you know, as soon as they tried, they were kind of systems get in the way and stop them. So, you know, this thing about Rwanda, for example, may have been quite a clumsy solution in inverted commas, but it had a certain logic to it, which is if you want to make something, if you want to uphold something as being out of against the law and something that will incur punishment or censure, punishment, forfeit. Isn't that's two notes playing the same, two notes playing just one note. And that's I need to work up the top end there with the fret leveling device, and we're at a correct angle, correct action. That needs to play properly at that end, but I can see that there's a very low fret up there, which is why it's playing a double note. It's a low fret that's causing it rather than a high fret, which is, as I've learned over the years now, the case. It's the low frets that limit what we can do. Yeah, so anyway, there we go. So that was my initial sort of, I don't know, not horror, but oh god, no. And actually, if I'm honest, I don't think Trump will do the things he claims. Wow. These frets are well, this fingerboard at this point is a bit up and downy, but I'll give it a little bit more work. Yeah, I just, you know, I've been following, and I've been concerned about certain cultures who I don't think are capable of harmonious integrated coexistence with our, you know, more traditional British culture. And I say that with 60 years of experience and observations, not just because somebody once told me that people from one particular walk of life are this and people from another one are that. It's from lived experience. I think there's a problem. I think we have to address it, we have to look at it. And actually what I know straight away is that it isn't looked at. That's the one thing I know, no matter whatever else we can say about, you know, the grey, you know, in-betweeny kind of arguments about whether this policy was ever likely to that or whether that policy was ever going to this. What's true is that I know absolutely that nobody is talking openly and honestly about the real problems underlying what appears to be, not what appears to be, what is currently uncontrolled immigration, illegal immigration. You know, for that you can read boats, right? People, thousands of people a week or whatever, you know, 400 people a day or something. Whatever it is, you know, people who, now, you know, certain political lobbies go off into, well, it's Britain's fault for not having any pathways, yada, yada, yada. No, it's not. It's the problem is the people who choose to break British law and enter illegally. If there's no pathway to make it easy to enter, you still don't get the right to decide you can come in just because there aren't enough convenient setup routes for you to get in that suit you. So it may be that as a society, Britain is lacking those formal routes, and maybe we should be censured, told off, criticised, fined even, you know, amongst our peers or whatever for not having those routes. But the point is, even if we don't have those routes, it is still against the law to come in just because we haven't got those routes and you think that gives you a moral right to break the law. So that's the thing that the average jolly British Tommy, I mean, you know, the joking aside, that the ordinary everyday British person is angry about, and that is that our country, our government, seems incapable of setting a boundary, a law, and upholding it. And that is that never goes away, no matter how many pompous politicians talk in length, and no matter how many people critique, you know, the plans, or the Rwanda this, or the Bibi Stockholm that, or the, you know, whatever else. The, you know, we don't want to be like Hungary or Poland or whatever those arguments. The British person knows only one thing, and that is the British government is incapable of stopping, preventing, or unwilling. Sorry, that's the important thing. It's either incapable, unable, or unwilling to stop X hundred, or, you know, however many thousand of cross-channel migrants per annum, right? And once they arrive, what the average person knows is that the majority of those illegal entrants remain for all kinds of reasons about we're nice people, we're fair, we're very compassionate, we're very empathetic. They tell us they had difficulties in their home country and that they'll be persecuted, and so we do this and we do that and whatever. The point is, the average person knows that we are either unwilling or unable to prevent those numbers of illegal migrants coming over, and that is simply continually unacceptable. And it's why the British voting public will, a certain big chunk of the British voting public will eventually move away from, you know, the polarised two faces of the same kind of coin, you know, the Labour and Conservative, both of whom have already proved now within the space of the last 6 months have demonstrated two different governments, neither of whom is any better at stopping illegal migration than the other. That's very telling. So to the average British person for whom this is a pressing concern, that says, well, there's no point. This is a major concern to me. It's probably the most pressing thing I experience every day that bothers me, and neither of the mainstream parties, not only neither of them will do anything about it, but if I try and talk about it or ask them or demand them to do anything, rather than do something about it or risk having uncomfortable conversations, they'll go to lengths such as shutting me up, putting me in prison perhaps for losing my temper when I'm not listened to for the 40th year in a row on this critical thing that hasn't changed in all of those 40 years or whatever. You know, so I know, let's lock them up if they're getting upset, or if they're stamping around shouting outside Parliament because nobody's taking their concerns seriously. Well, let's treat them as revolutionaries and throw them in prison, and then maybe they'll hang themselves once they're in there. So anyway, look, the point is, I get it. I wish we didn't have to have ropey characters, but maybe that's the nature of the thing of people. Maybe it does take a complete nothing to lose maverick type to take the risks of saying what other people won't say. And it's clearly, you know, there clearly are some characters like that who pay a huge price in terms of their being deplatformed isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. It's marginalised in the political arena. Anyway, so is it inevitable? Yes. Do I want a world in which we pull back and go, nah, it's got nothing to do with this Ukraine thing. Nah, leave Putin do what he wants. It's our fault. You know, we're terrible. We did bad things in colonial days. So let Putin have his little bit of empire. You know, who are we to complain? Because we did just as bad. I don't think that's a good position. I don't really want to be coming from that angle, if I'm honest. But you know, I also recognise that maybe a chunk of my fellow Britishers do want to come from that position. Maybe it does feel right to them. Anyway, so meanwhile, we have people who are going to represent that unrepresented mass of people, and it is a lot of people, I think. You know, and part of the mainstream that doesn't want to acknowledge it, because if you acknowledge it, whether you're the mainstream political parties or the mainstream media or whatever, if you acknowledge this unrequited, unacknowledged, unlistened to set of concerns, you know, it means you have to answer the question of why you do nothing about it. Why do you punish people for raising it? Why do you marginalise their concerns? Why do you, cancel them and deplatform them and so on? And you know, I think, and of course the other thing is, if you acknowledge the scale of the problem, you have to then you have to explain why you aren't doing anything about it, or seemingly incapable of doing something about it. I think that would be an extremely uncomfortable place for a lot of people to be at. Far better to make out that the people who are really concerned are being hysterical, and then you don't have to have any serious conversations about it, because you shunt it off into the sort of remit, or it's off into the territory of loonies, you know, extremists. So you don't have to deal with it. So what I'm going to do now, while I've been chatting away, and I'm sorry if it's just blether and you're tired of hearing blether and you didn't want to come on, but you know me, it's the biggest thing that's happened in the last few days, and it's pretty earth-shattering, and I just think we can't avoid looking at it. It's so important, because you know, our cultures, our cities our culture, and our towns and our communities are falling apart in some ways. Not all of them, but it's become very difficult, and it's become very difficult to hold on to any faith. There we go, 0.3 over the first fret. Difficult to keep any faith. I don't mean religious faith, but faith that the situation is ever going to improve. You know, and I was talking to my brother about this yesterday, and but both of us born in a similar, early 60s era, but both of us were children of that era that kind of believed that we had inherited not a great white heat of progress sort of thing, but a definite human progress thing away from savagery and towards civilization, inverted commas. And we both are struck now by this sinking feeling that that's no longer the case, and we feel like we've lost it. And of course, what you see of the world is always, to a great degree, depends upon how you look at it, and that's true too. And I think we have to come out of this sort of time and remember that politics is only politics. It isn't the be all and end all of everything. It isn't everything. We are in scary times. We seem to celebrate and elevate authoritarian, some tyrants. I mean, it seems to be tyrants seem to be on the up. You know, and I know people who support Donald Trump would fight back at me even calling him authoritarian, far less tyrant. And he's not in the category of Putin or Stalin or Xi or even Mr. Rocket Man, as he calls him. You know, so he's not. He's a kind of, he's a huckster, a grifter, which isn't, again, it's not the worst thing in the world to be. It's a type. It can be effective and can achieve a lot in certain spheres. I guess it's just very telling when that's who you've got as your leaders of the free world kind of thing. When softies like us, children of the progressive 60s, kind of hoped that we would, the figureheads of our time would be perhaps more wiser people, more calm and less resorting to hate and division and stuff like that. That's what we would have hoped. But as I was saying to Steve, it just seems like, well, wanting that and it happening are two different things, and neither was guaranteed. Nothing was guaranteed. We got to the moon, and then it seemed to go pear-shaped afterwards. It wasn't perfect then, but anyway. So we are in an interesting time. If Trump and Putin come to an agreement that suits Putin, that pisses off Ukraine, but Ukraine feels, for the sake of a certain number of young lives, it has to agree to it. Well, that won't be the end of the world, but it sure definitely will mean that they will be attacked again, and we will either have to stand up to it then, if not now. So we're always buying time, and if buying time is the right thing to do, then maybe that was the right thing to do. It's hard. It's difficult for me to say. Hard for me to say I'm sorry. I mean, if you're a politician, you say, all right, we're going to stand up to this. It's other people's children you are going to put in the firing line of taking that stand if you do. So I don't know if it's worth it. I've got a feeling that if it's worth fighting for the principle of international order, and I really, if you ever get a chance, I totally recommend reading The Price of Peace by William Beveridge, written in 1945, as the war in Europe the war in Europe had either just come to an end, and they were waiting for the Japanese end of it to end. Anyway, it's all focused, it's a small book, but all focused on the urgency of working out what were the causes of the return to war after the first Great War that they all thought was going to be the war to end all wars, but clearly it wasn't. So Beveridge and others knew that they had to learn something quickly and explore and set up some sort of structure that would stand a chance of preserving peace. And Beveridge and others, but in this paper or this little book, his conclusion is that the cause of war in the First and the Second World War, the one they were just living through, getting to very, very close to the surface of their thinking. The causes of those two wars was international anarchy, and international anarchy could just be considered as the simplest way to look at it is to consider it as the absence of policed, enforced law at an international level, and it, you know, so the statement they make, or the premise they work on, is that we all, or most of us, accept that without law and order at the national level and the personal individual level, we couldn't maintain peaceful coexistence in our societies. We'd be, you know, fighting over each other all the time. It would be. He calls it anarchy, and he's then asserts that that war is the inevitable product of international anarchy. So in other words, international lawlessness, no structure, the absence of the structures and enforcement of law at an international level. So you can see straight away that's obviously, you know, it's not rocket science, but that's where the United Nations comes from. And the point about the United Nations as they saw it then, was that the United Nations would only work if it was an organisation that held more force than the constituent members. In other words, it had to be able to police by force, if necessary, the member states of this world order. And I don't mean world order in that maybe the way people talk about it today. This is an international or a pan-national, whatever, global collection of countries, sovereign states, but which agree to be subject to international rule of law, which is consistently applied to all of them. And what characterizes that rule of law is it has to have the ability to make decisions, make laws, and to uphold them where necessary with force. And that force evidently has to outweigh the force of a non-compliant country or transgressing country or alliance, a transgressing alliance, which is probably more closer to their experience at the time, like an axis of states. And so that was the foundation of the United Nations, and it made complete sense. And of course, the tragedy is to be able to see what happened in the intervening years. And the first thing they did wrong is they made the Security Council, the Allied powers who were the primary allies in the Second World War, who defeated the German Axis. They made them into a Security Council, so a permanent member of a permanent Security Council, which stood above all of the member states. So you might have 200 member states of the United Nations, and then you had 4 or 5, whatever it was, founder or Security Council members, which, and this is of course the fatal flaw, included Russia, of course, as a significant player in the defeat of Nazism. But I think the problem you then got by creating a structure that was elevated above the rest of the members of the United Nations, you basically you gave status to these countries, these Security Council members, to stand above the law, and it was a mistake. In other words, nobody in the United Nations should have a veto. So when let's say, I don't know how it works exactly, but let's say when a majority agree that one member has broken the, or, you know, ridden roughshod over the basic rights, national laws and rights of another sovereign country, the United Nations has to be able to deliberate on that and apply its sanctions or its military force, its military policing of the transgressing country, regardless of how long it had been in the United Nations, regardless whether, in the case of the Soviet Union, it had been a so-called, you know, one of the victors at the victors' table. You know, and actually, if you look into history, you'll see that the Soviets absolutely like to big up their prowess in the Second World War, and what they were good at is exactly what they're good at today, which is squandering or spending lives cheaply in exchange for centimetres of ground. And if you have no upper limit price that you're prepared to spend, then of course you will eventually conquer all the territories you wish to conquer. It goes without saying. But anyway, so you can see when you're reading this, the Price of Peace, you can see that the flaw of the Security Council and its special permanent membership and veto powers is a fatal mistake. As, by the way, is the fact that what the truth is that the Security Council, the United Nations, whether you call it through the Security Council or just as in the United Nations, it never ever wielded its overwhelming force to settle or to enforce a ruling, and so it never really put itself to the test. And then now you'll see it, you know, well, not even sure it even condemns in a coherent way anymore, but you know, it certainly doesn't have, it was left long ago. Actually no, by the time it was even established, America and Russia certainly were militarized vastly beyond any independent amount that you could have as a United Nations force. And of course, if the police are going to police with force if necessary, you can't leave that force in the hands of the people you may need to police and say, oh, can you give me back the guns so I can chase you around with them and then make you comply, please, Mr. Molotov. You know, it's not going to happen. So, you know, a prerequisite of a working UN would be an independent, separate, isolated force, which a majority of the UN could bring to bear on a transgressor. But that force, as you can see, obviously has to be a bigger force than any of the constituent members, and it was just nobody ever submitted to that limitation from the day it started. So, you know, it was absolutely flawed in that respect. It was never going to work. That's pretty tragic, isn't it? Good idea, not a chance. Now when I'm here, I'm going to take off these tuners because this headstock is filthy, and I'm also going to find me a white tusk nut because he says so. Don't tell me I've only got black ones. You know what? In all the world, in all the bars, and all the towns, you have to walk in a mine. I'm going to have to borrow a black one for now and replace it with a white one, which seems to be all I ever do. Anyway, yeah, so fundamental mistakes of the UN was to create a Security Council that had special privileges above and beyond the average member. And then the next fatal flaw, pretty obviously really, was it never set out, and certainly never achieved, to create an autonomous policing force whose strength was greater than any of its members. And of course, to play into that, you would have to, the member state, it could only work if the member states agreed to be to leave the policing to the overarching body, the UN, and to give up the individual resort to arms. And of course, we know that when it came to that, the risk required to do that, nobody would be willing to do it, and nobody did it. And so as a result, everybody built up their arms, and within literally nanoseconds, the UN was behind its behind any nation, even some of the weakest nation states. So it's just never going to work, which is a real tragedy, because you think about it, we've carried on running the UN, and we have 70 years or something of trying to make it work, and it never being able to work, given that the first requirement of limiting weapons to the United Nations body only was never put in place, and never will be, was never going to be, and it's impossible to do so now without a kind of huge disarmament conscious choice to go that way. So there we go. It didn't work. It's been playing sort of dressing up ever since, and of course the other fatal flaw was the Security Council veto, and so you have the absurd situation that a permanent member of the Security Council with a veto on any decisions can be the one to break the international law, and as soon as the rest of NATO and the civilized world try to censure or control its behaviour, it slaps a veto on it and ducks out without being held to anything, because the truth is it has no vested interests in the UN, really. It's just part of it as a way of having some control, but it doesn't actually want the UN for the purposes that it was conceived. So yeah, it's a total disaster. But truthfully, unless we get past that, there is going to be no peaceful future where state is going to stop fighting against state and trying to steal its resources, and so on. I mean, that's the tragedy of it. And how many more years have to go by for our species to go, do you know what? We can't keep doing this. We're all basically competing against each other, like animals in a cruel jungle, slightly brutal jungle, because it ain't working. And of course, worst of all, is that now we're getting into, and I don't care that some people insist this doesn't happen, but we are into a kind of ecological crisis of forcing a lot of movement of people, and it will increasingly force more movement of people, and so we're going to be under more brutal resource competition, and powers the temptation will be on all the bullying powers to bully the little ones and steal their stuff, and we're going to see more of it rather than less, unfortunately. And so paradoxically, the time for having the wisdom to understand that we need to submit to an international law if we are to avoid international anarchy and constant war, which is what Beveridge was writing about. We have to recognise that part of that endeavour is to give up some aspects of sovereignty. Now, obviously not national characteristics, not the songs you sing, the flags you wave, the laws you make around your citizens' day-to-day living and so on, but you have to give up some sovereignty. Namely, you're not permitted to walk around the planet Earth wielding weapons. That is for the police force of the planet Earth, the United Nations, as it was intended. That's for that to wield. And of course you don't see anyone willing to submit to that, do you? That's the bizarre tragedy. Now I'm missing a file here, which is weird because it's my little three-sided file. No, I had it. There it is. Ta-da! So I'm just going to soften the edges of this a little tiny bit, so we don't have any sharp bits, and do the same here. This has got a safer edge on the bottom of the file so it doesn't damage the wood, and you can get into the corners and round things off like so. So I'm going to fit this string tree of tusk, and if I can't find a white one now, we'll get one along the way, but we'll have to stick with this black one for now. It's not the end of the world. But there's our string tree. We've got tusk here. Let's stick with tusk for the string tree. It's a much better material. Now what we're going to do is we're going to need to we've re-crowned everything. So the next stage is going to be to sand and polish this all off, which I think I'll do off camera because it's a pain. So just while I'm on camera, what I'll do is I'll just reattach the tuners. Now I've cleaned the back of the headstock. The finish is falling to bits here, so there's nothing I can do about that, other than maybe down the line we can refinish the whole thing. If it bothers Larry at all, I mean, it doesn't stop it being playable. It's just it can be really annoying to think of Fender using whatever flawed process it was to, their spraying process when they have a maple boarded neck is horrible, because this flakiness of the finish, the lack of adhesion or whatever the problem is it not only does it occur all the way along the back of the neck as here and the headstock, but it also applies to the gloss covered maple fingerboard as well, and they spray over the frets, which makes the whole material even weaker, especially if you have to do any fret work, and it inevitably falls off, which then spreads to everywhere else. So this stuff, the minute it starts breaking off, it'll just expand over time, but there ain't nothing we could do about it. Okay, so I'm just going to tighten these up, and then I will mask off the fingerboard and do the sanding bit, and I'll put the radio on while that's happening. So I do wish, actually I think we all have, when it comes to talking about things that have for the last while have been very inflammatory. So for example, if you're a kind of yeehaw Trump fan and you want to come on and scream at the soft, gutless libtard you might think I am, because I want to talk about all these different things at a different level. If you want to come on and just scream at me and insult me, then actually I have to tell you that's more important to our lack of ability to get on than is anything about the actual difference in any of our views. You do understand that. It's the breakdown in communication isn't about the content of our views, it's about the quality of your inability to communicate with somebody you don't agree with without being insulting and dismissive. So I just think, even if we disagree, that's the least important of the things. I think the most important thing is that we just, if we all want to contribute to the place being a bit better and lasting a bit longer and being a bit less warlike and a bit more productive and constructive, I think we all have to tell ourselves that when we hear somebody whose views we don't agree with, we must double our efforts to be respectful, honest. We don't have to hide our disagreements, but we have to do it in a way that we don't dump our anger on them. And that's what I hear all the time. That's why those places online become echo chambers. It becomes that way for, it doesn't matter whether it is Democrat or Republic. Whichever chamber you're in, it's a natural tendency that the thing shuts down and only reflects the comfortable, because nobody wants to write in there that, but I disagree with you guys, but I really want to be able to chat with you, and then you get a wall of abuse and you can't stay there, and so that the first angry abusive reaction seals the echo chamber, and people who disagree but would like to talk about the differences give up. Understandably, it's just too warlike and it's too bitter and there's too much anger. I can do without that in my life. So why bother? If nobody has even the slightest bit of curiosity about how someone else thinks and why someone else thinks the way they do, if you genuinely can't muster any curiosity about that, then you can't have a conversation with somebody you disagree with, because your contempt will simmer over the top of everything. Any question you may be asking, or any chance of you finding something out or learning something new is, it's swamped in contempt. So that's I've always been tried to impress on people. Please, when I say don't come to this this video or whatever, and just tell me what an asshole I am and how fantastic you are and how wrong I am. I don't say don't do that because it hurts me or I'm frightened of you being aggressive and nasty. It's not really that. You can't hurt me. You're miles away in your home being a keyboard warrior. But the reason I ask it, or the reason I ask for you to withhold that and actually try and put our common humanity above the differences that are attempting to make you so angry, is because I think we can find out stuff about each other's points of view. We can create a less destructive space where we actually stand a chance of learning something, because what we all know is that the so-called echo chamber is it's like hermetically sealed. Nothing new gets in. We just reaffirm our points of view on stuff. So anyway, if you want to be a better person for yourself, not just for me or anybody else, please, if your instinct or your reaction, that you consciously notice yourself reacting, thinking, I'm angry, I want to tell this guy what a liberal tard he is, or whatever you want to call me, or a this or a that, or a wishy-washy something, whatever it is, you immediately might trigger you to feel that you are right and I'm wrong. I just think I encourage you to, the one place you can make the world a slightly tiny bit better than it was before is if you control your responses and your reactions to the world around you. And actually truthfully, that's the only place you do have power. And Donald Trump has not really even understood that either. He still believes, he believes that there's meaningful power in being the man who controls the or a constructive or satisfying power in being the man who chooses to destroy us all with his button, or being the man who throws out people from the refugee camp or whatever. And it isn't. The real power is in changing the way we interact with each other, and it's hard to do because the bottom line is most of us have a big payoff from being angry, and that's what I see about the sad part of the. I totally get the people who think there's a huge problem with unfettered illegal immigration, and who think there's a real problem with certain cultures, religious cultures, that just don't fit well with traditional British culture, you might call it, or who threaten British culture and certainly perhaps don't want to be part of it and want to change it. Those are scary things, and you've got every right to voice them, and it can be anger inducing to be shut up or put down for trying to express concerns about them. We get put into those categories, but I think we have to. I think we should all learn to just control to understand our emotions better, and control them in the sense that we don't unconsciously sort of spurt them all over the place, or get them to mess up our communications with the people we really do need to communicate with. The people we have to share the world with, whether we would like to or not. Because if the only way out of sharing the world with them is to destroy them all, then it's not a very realistic thing. And the only way it's going to improve is if we take care of our own anger and contempt. And I was very impressed to see someone in a forum, a guitar forum no less, who used a phrase or a similar phrase to that I like to use, where he encouraged somebody to approach somebody had posted something and they were asking for advice or showing what they did, and there were quite a lot of people who were sort of responding contemptuously, and the wise person after my own heart was just stepping in to say, could you maybe consider trying to approach this subject from a curiosity about what they're doing and maybe why they're doing it, instead of needing to be right and therefore defaulting to contempt. And I thought that's an absolutely brilliant position. Right, I'm going to go off and do all this polishing bit, and I'll come back when it's time to put the new strings on. So I'll put the thing on charge because it never lasts battery wise. Okie dokie, shiny, cleaned, polished, oiled. So we're now ready to put on some strings, and these are going to be 9.5s. Now we did have this thought about slackening off this back a minute. And I'm going to see if we can do that wiggly thing where we encourage the neck to come out. Now for this to work, your screws need not to be biting into the wood, so you need wide enough screws through the so I'm just going to take this right off for a minute. So the thing is, you don't really want your screws to be biting into the wood of the pocket at all. And so it's better that you have a clear run through. But let's just, right, we're going to put a tiny bit of straightening into this. Yeah, that's all we're doing. That's all we're doing. Put that back on there. Lift it up. Put it round. Okay. Well, I didn't sleep much last night at all, actually. I was up till about 3:34 watching the election results come in, and after that I just didn't feel like it. So I kind of stayed up and dozed a bit, but ended up just being a weird day because of that. So I think I'll probably be back to normal by tomorrow. And I got, pleased to say, I got my brand new StewMac Fret Tang Nipper deluxe version, top quality version. So definitely not a cheap one. Well, none of them are cheap. A good quality one, and I'm so looking forward to using it. And I shall get onto the Echo guitar refret, which has been waiting for over a week. But lo and behold, this tool came and no extra duty to pay, which is fantastic. So Larry is definitely an 8 gauge string player on electrics, so hence we need to flatten out the neck a bit to make sure it's as low as it can be, and not really expecting the strings to pull anything too much in the opposite direction, because there's not a lot of pull on these 8s. Also, I have to be very careful in the stretching process because I don't want to break them. So I've got some builds to do. I've got a custom build Strat from Nick in Arizona, which I've got all the parts and hardware for now. I'm just waiting for a fingerboard slotting jig. And I had made my own a while back, but it was a bit clumsy. So I took the plunge and bought one, ordered one, so that's cool. Right, so here we go. For this where's the cutters? For this type of tuners, I basically make sure the string is up in the block, pull it all the way through, go 2 tuners past the tuner we're going into, like so, stick it in, bend it across, and then just tighten it. And then tuning stability, as Larry already knows, is all about getting the slack out of your strings, and we do that by stretching them and taking great care with these 8 gauges, because we really don't want them to be breaking. So go to the string we want, past 2, cut. Now I could probably speed things up a little bit with this, with this. So string all the way up into the block, stick it into the thing, press it over and hold it taut. The D past 2 posts past its destination. Press it down, hold it taut, and it on. It's also interesting, we've got Larry's got I've got at home Larry's it's a classic vibe Telecaster body with a no-name neck on it at the moment, but he's ordered a roasted maple neck which we're going to fit, and it's going to be a short scale conversion, so it's going to be a 24 3/4 inch neck on a telly body, which should be really interesting. So when that arrives, we've got that one to build. We've got Trekkie 11 to finish. We've got custom one I made for JT years ago to refurbish, just for my own keepsakes. I think we'll keep that in the Really Love Guitars Archives Museum. We've got some guitars coming next week. Plenty of stuff going on. Okay, so here we are, close to the edge, close to having done the Strat, and the aim being to see if Larry can get to like it more than he has done so far. And then if he does, then it's worth maybe investing more time in to make it into the, you know, the sort of the player that you want it to be. I think it's always good to hold off doing that until you know it's worth investing in. And the same applies to every guitar I make, even from scratch. You know, there's always a stop point where I go, no, this isn't worth spending any more time on it. And I rarely get to that extreme position, but sometimes I do, and I'll park it, and then I'll park it until I have the energy and the, I don't know, motivation to come back to it and try again. And it's great thing is it's usually only a small number of things that have to change to make it work. But you know, when you come back afresh, you can sort them out, which is always a nice thing. So I'm just sort of giving these strings a bedding down pull. Just very careful with that high E because it's very, very fine. Well, I'm sure that the previous strings on this were not 8s, so I can tell you that much. Right, 1.25. Right, so I've just tweaked the action so as I go, and I'm going to now do the stretching. Thumb and forefinger get out of all of the slack, and then once we've stretched all the slack out, we'll check the tremolo function, and then we'll, as final thing, we'll just check the intonation and tweak that if necessary. scared on that high E8. Okay, next stage, check the intonation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to yes, get this thing, the wire, guitar cable, hook that up to the tuner, and we'll now check the intonation. Okay, that's showing up as a bit on the long side, so pull it back towards me. We'll get this high E intonated, and then we'll set the other, all the others relative to that. Still think it's too long. Sorry, too. What is it now? It's too long, so go that way. Can't go hardly any further, so I think we're stuck at the limits. Okay, now I'm just going to tweak the others into a familiar sequence with that one. Make all the other ones follow suit. Okay. Okay, and finally we will see the position of this thing. Well, not quite fine, we've got to put the back plate on. Switch that off. So we now basically lighten this up as much as we can so it's as light as possible to operate in the downward only position, and we don't want it to move off the deck. We don't want it to move off the deck when we're bending another note. So I'm loosening off the claw screws. Probably do a tiny bit up again. Okay, we've got 125 bang on, fractionally under. Mm-hmm, 1.25, yes, a little bit higher. Okay, good. Nearly there. Okie dokie. Oops. Just check this. That feels a fraction loose to me. Let me get my Stumac tool and see if I can. That's not the right one, is it? It's not going to work. It's not that one, it's not that one, it's not that one, it's not that one. Not a very easy one to turn. Really good. That comes off. That goes under there like so, something like that. there, flip it over, and we're just about done. So there we go, on the back. Some people get very freaked out by using a power tool to do these kinds of pickguard screws. You'll notice that whenever I do it, I always hold the screw up with my fingers so I can catch the screwdriver if it tries to tilt over and head towards the finish. I've been caught out before. Once bitten, twice shy and all that. So I'm aware of it. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I've got some glue on the back of there which I just need to quickly rub off, and then we're done. We'll be heading home. Let's see if Larry doesn't get on better with this than before. See if we can learn to love it, find peace with it. Harmony. Thank you for watching. See you again on the next one, which I don't quite know what it will be, but thank you for sticking it out with me.